Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to Getting Savvy in Health, Wealth, and Beauty. Important to note that everything is for entertainment purposes only. Please do speak and meet with a financial advisor before making any investment decisions. And also, please meet and speak with your GP before making any health or beauty decisions. Okay, Melissa, so getting savvy. Here we are. A lot to talk about, particularly in the markets, although it's definitely, I think the name of the game right now is uncertainty. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. And on your docket, what are you looking at?
Well, after we spent the weekend together in Aspen and did some good skiing and also good après skiing or praying, however you want to call it, I thought we'd talk about liver health and alcohol. And I read a really good article by a hepatologist, which is a liver doctor, on some of the best tips they would give on how to protect your liver and things that you can do or things we need to think about. So I thought I would talk about that.
Great.
Also, it's springtime finally, so allergies, and there's a lot of people that suffer hay fever and spring allergies. So I just wanted to talk about that. Then a study on pecans that was somewhat interesting. And then if we have time, we can get to a new study I saw on marijuana.
Okay. Sounds great. And yeah, it's funny. Après should be a verb, right? Après. I guess après in itself
You could say
sounds
a
like a verb.
praying. Yeah, a praying.
Praying.
Yeah, I'm praying.
Praying. Yeah. And so, I have to tell you, Melissa, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but I do get, some questions and inquiries from friends about how is Melissa so fit? And having spent a few
I know people think I
know
like
your secret now. I know
Yeah.
your secret. I am going to reveal it. So,
Dun,
okay,
dun,
first
dun.
of da, da, da. So first of all, though, everybody needs to know you were a competitive gymnast
Mhm.
and I was a competitive figure skater. So I think sometimes when you are always like you regularly work out. I do, but not to the same intensity. But when I do, muscles come back, I think faster,
Yeah.
right?
I agree. I think if you've had athletic training, first of all, you know how to train, you know how to whip into shape when you need to. And I do think there's muscle memory that it remembers. You remember how to build that muscle and how to get, yeah, tight.
Okay, so that's point number one. But point number two is Melissa doesn't stop. And I was wondering how she can take her daughter to an Orlando dance competition, and she's a doctor, and she's goes in the plays with her daughter, who's also a superb actress or actor. I
Mhm.
mean, and then she goes to skating, and the list goes on with you in your life. And I realized I'm gonna share something here. So we were getting up early to do what's called first tracks. So they only allow about 20, 25 people on the mountain at most. With an instruction, you do top to bottom. And so I'm lying in bed and I hear you get in the shower, and within 30 seconds, you're out of the shower. And I'm like, that's how she does it all. She takes 30-second showers. I'm in there for like 13 minutes. So you just do
Well,
everything
I'm
fast.
very efficient. I get things done very efficiently. So I knew, like we had a fun night the night before. We didn't go to
Yeah.
bed early, and then I knew we had to be up for first tracks, which means that we had to be on the mountain by what time were we meeting the instructor?
8:10.
Yeah,
8:10.
so I want to maximize my sleep, which means I'm going to set my alarm for like 7:45, which means I wake up, I got to shower, I got to brush my teeth, I got to have a quick coffee, and then put my stuff on, then I'm ready to go. Like I don't do a lot of downtime.
You don't.
I do everything quickly. Yeah.
It's pretty astonishing, I have to
Yeah,
say.
I like to pack in a lot of things. Like people often say to me, like, I don't think you can fit that in. And I'm like, no, 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 I can just do this, da, 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 da. But it's at some point, I guess I'll get tired, but it's just the way I'm used to going. I guess like even when I grew up, with gymnastics, I'd get up, I'd have to like go to
Yeah,
school, eat in the car on the way to gymnastics, be doing my homework on the way home. So I was used to doing everything very quickly.
true.
And I think they call it in like Yiddish or Jewish or whatever. My grandparents used to call it shpilkas. Like I can't sit still.
Schmilta.
Shpilkas. But I don't have ADHD. I'm not hyperactive. I just like to have things on the go. I don't do great with just, you know,
Yeah. Well,
no,
let me tell you, there was no sitting when we were in Aspen together.
no,
There
no.
was
We
none.
did tons. We packed it.
Yeah.
We only had Thursday to Sunday. So we had to ski. We had to party. We had to eat. We had to shop. We had to,
Massage.
must get a massage. We had things to get done.
Yeah.
Wasting
Yeah.
my time just sitting there,
I know, I
you
know.
know?
It was interesting. It was eye-opening. Like, and I think too, though, when I figure skated, my mom would pick me up from school and I'd sit in the back seat and I'd have to change from my school clothes into my skating clothes in the back seat because there was just
Yeah.
so little time. So I hear what you're saying. I guess I've just lost it along the way
Okay,
ish.
you say that, but first of all, I will say this. You're a few years older than me, and you keep up no problem. Your energy level's next level. So don't joke around. You have a lot of on the go too. Okay?
Thank you.
There's not a lot of, yeah, like you're on your own going skiing. There's not a lot of women that would just get up and go do it on their own, ski all day, do work, go out, meet people, socialize, network. I mean, so.
Yeah.
But I will say there's something before we move on, there's
Yeah.
something called NEAT. So it's an acronym and it stands for non-exercise associated thermogenesis. And it's a major contributor to a person's weight. And what it means is some people say, I exercise today, and that's their calorie burn for the day, thinking, oh, they went on the treadmill for 45 minutes. But then the
Yeah.
rest of the day, they just sit and they don't do much. So, if the kids' clothes are upstairs, they don't run up the stairs to get them and come back down. They'll send the kid up. They just sit.
Ah,
But there's this neat, which means that when you're not formally exercising, it means you're burning calories just in your everyday life, doing things, whether
yeah.
it's getting the clothes up and down the stairs or whether it's running to an appointment, whether you're just busy.
Mm-hmm. There's something
So,
to be said for that. When I think about
yeah,
even my parents, just one last point on this, my parents, I mean, they never, we didn't have gardeners or people to rake the leaves. We didn't have leaf blowers. My parents at the cottage were out there raking leaves, stuffing the bags, with the leaves
yeah.
to transport them. And they were fit as fiddles. My mom is turning 90 and she's got a better body than a lot of like 35, 40-year-olds. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big problem with modern society that life's become so convenient that we can just Uber Eats our food. We can, get our groceries delivered. We can get people to come to our house to do we can do all these things that avoids our need to actually get up and move and do
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow, interesting
Anyway,
topic. Yeah.
I know a little bit of your secret
Okay, there you go. Because
because
people
everybody's
think I'm
asking
so
me.
muscular. People think that I am a secret exerciser. They're like, oh, she must work out 2 hours a day in the morning and not tell anybody. But, you know,
Okay, but the one thing is, I did bump into your friends in the airport, and they did say to me that they don't go on vacation with you because you're always going. It's
this
not a
is true.
vacation, and they said that when they're sitting on the dock with you, that you're doing like planks and handstands and backflips, and then
Hmm.
swimming across the bay.
Yeah.
So
I don't like to sit. I can't just, yeah. Unless I'm into a good book or something, but I can't just sit. I feel, I don't know, like my body needs to do something.
yeah, well, it's great. It works, obviously.
Vilkas.
Okay, what did you say?
Vilkas.
Oh,
That's
that's
the word.
the
That's the
Yiddish name.
Yiddish or Jewish or
Okay.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
forgot already.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of things though that are working and not working, let's talk a little bit about the markets, and I want to hear from your perspective as well. What you're hearing and seeing, and I would just say that I think the name of the game right now in the markets, particularly the U.S. or North American markets, is uncertainty, policy uncertainty. We know this with respect to um, the tariffs. We heard this past week that Trump is putting 25% tariffs on all autos going into the States, as well as auto parts. And he's also said to the auto companies not to increase prices to compensate for that. In other words, the companies have to eat the costs versus the consumer. And, the consumer, when you look at the market, so the market's on a year-to-date basis, just called the S&P 500, down by about 8%. That's from the February peak. And that's because people are really concerned about what the tariffs as a tax will end up doing to the consumer and to companies, and that the consumers have pulled back. And Lululemon, as an example, reported their most recent results this week. Very good results. But what I've always said to you, and what people I think through this are learning, is that there's such a thing called quarterly conference calls. So when the company management, they release their results, their numbers came in better than expected, but they give guidance, and they give guidance for the rest of the year or the next quarter based on what the company management is seeing. Are they seeing the same kind of traffic coming into their stores? Are they seeing the same kind of purchasing power? Are the basket sizes, so how many items per person, that's your basket size. Is that trending higher or lower? And so the guidance from Lululemon's management was cautious. They're concerned about the state of the consumer. So that stock was down 14% when they
Wow.
report,
Even
which is
despite their good earnings.
despite good earnings. So that's why, when we talk, I say the earnings are one thing, that's one part of the puzzle or the picture. And then the earnings are, or sorry, the guidance is the other. There's a lot more to say, but any thoughts there?
Well, it sort of goes to what we were talking about a few weeks ago, how, Lululemon, even though it's a Canadian company, a lot of their materials and stuff is from Indonesia and Vietnam, like a lot of their stuff. So we're sort of talking like they shouldn't be as impacted by the tariffs. But I guess what you're talking about is just the state of the consumer, that
Right.
Canadians or people all over,
Americans.
Americans
Mhm.
too, are just not sure about their spending power. Like it's just uncertainty. People don't know. Like, are we going into a recession?
Right.
Who's going to be our prime minister? What are
Hmm.
our taxes? Like, we just don't know. So I think people are dialing back a little bit of their excess spending. And I don't know how much excess money people have in their
That's
pockets
right.
right now. Yeah, given the mortgage defaults and a lot of the stuff that's uh,
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
I
And so
mean,
yeah,
mhm.
go ahead.
I'm wearing Lululemon right now. This
Oh,
top.
well, remember too, you and I, a number of months back, thought of looking at Lululemon
Yeah.
stock because it's still a very popular brand. And I didn't do it today because I just feel like the markets, I mean, this is, as I said last time, this is the time to sharpen your pencil and see if there are some great companies out there that
Yeah.
you want to own that are obviously more now attractively valued. And is it still probably on the early side? Probably. I mean, as you know, I bought an airline stock a couple of weeks ago. Well, the airlines, the cruise lines, anything consumer oriented is still getting hit to the downside because
Yeah.
there's this real concern. So, if I really believe in one of those companies, I can double down, or I can wait it out. But anyway, my point with the Lululemon is it's down 14% in one day. It would be worth it to look at the valuation, and where it is today versus historical, and see if it's a company that you love and you want to buy into.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but when you analyze stocks, do you ever have a price that you're like, if it hits this, I'll buy it
A
on your
lot
like
of
watch
people
list?
do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a lot. That's how a lot of people do it. But I think that you'd still have to look at the price and then look at all the fundamentals, as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned, and look at the valuation. Because if the earnings have also come down, that stock just got more expensive. If the earnings have stayed the same, then it is more attractive because you're paying per earnings, price over earnings, the PE multiple.
Mhm.
So, if you have 10 divided by 5, right?
Mhm.
That's 2. So that's a 2 times PE multiple. But if you have 10 divided by 1, because 1 is the earnings, right?
Mhm.
Then it's a 10 times multiple. The earnings fell. It's more expensive.
Expensive. Right.
So, you have to look at it in combination. And also too, not even just that, but like, has the state of affairs gotten even worse or has it gotten better?
So hard to know. You know what? I find it all a bit of a exercise of futility, if that makes any sense.
Well,
Like, it's not, but I mean, it's like all this stuff. I think at the end of the day, like, because no one can predict the future. Like, you just can't. You can get a general sense of what you think a good company is
yeah.
and what you think a good product and what's good management.
Yep.
And then you have to look at, like you said, opportunities when it's at the right price.
Right.
So a lot of
Eh,
these companies, like you said with Lululemon, that's an example of one that I think is a good company. Like I think people are going to be wearing Lululemon.
mhm.
Um,
Just from your perspective, and when I've been like, I guess just a few, like we've been in a few places over the past few weeks,
Mhm.
and I still see a lot of Lululemon. Obviously, see a lot of Aloe, but
Mhm.
again, you wear both. Do you think one is like
So I wear
Lululemon's
Lululemon.
older?
I wear Lululemon. I wear Aloe, and I also wear Temu dupes.
Mm,
Okay, so I
hmm.
go cheap, expensive, very expensive. Like I sort of run the gamut. The aloe is the most expensive, and that's what I wear more fashionably. Like you and I, when we were out in Aspen, I had that cute aloe set that I was
Yeah,
wearing, and it's almost like fashionable. You could even wear it like day to night. Like you still feel like you look good.
got
Lululemon's
it.
still my go-to if I want a really good, solid, comfortable active wear. But I'm
Okay.
not really wanting to wear Lululemon out for dinner, you know?
Right. But
And
you think though that both, so a lot of the time when you have these companies that there can be not cross competition, but um that can an aloe eat into Lulu and can a Lulu eat into aloe?
for sure, I think they're definitely competitive, but I don't think Lulu can eat into aloe in terms of the fashion side yet.
Okay.
Like I wore an aloe dress, a red dress when I was on the cruise, and it looks like a nice evening dress. Like you can't buy anything like that at Lululemon. But
Okay.
Lululemon has the men's clothes that they wear out at night. So I mean, I don't know. I think they're both good
Okay.
brands.
Okay.
And Aritzia too. Aritzia is right in there also with a lot of
Yeah. Okay. The one thing I would just bring up too, just as we think about the US and Canadian markets having pulled back, the TSX was, down 1.6% on Friday. I would just say as well, the US markets were down by like 1.5 to 2%, 2.7% on Friday. So I only bring that up because when you end the week on a down note,
Mhm.
it's not a great sign. Doesn't mean it can't turn around. It's just like it wasn't able to hold on to any stability or momentum. We actually really did see the markets trend lower. But one of the other big themes that's been going on right now is that we're seeing significant outflows out of US equities and into European equities.
Yeah.
So people might be hearing that, is Europe the place to be? And I read a really interesting report the other day that suggested that over the past, you know, I don't know, 20 years that we've had kind of pullbacks in US markets and people have moved into European markets. That's happened about 9 times. It hasn't really become a long-term trend. In other words, that US excellence in the place to be kept going. Even though you see people pull their money out and go into Europe, it wasn't something that was actually sustainable that really worked.
Yeah.
But
I've
that
read
is
some
a
articles too.
trend.
Yeah, I think it's a trend and maybe a short-term thing. But it
And
seems
that's
to
the
me like
question.
lately, like every time you hear, oh, the market's down on a Friday, then on Monday it rebounded. So it seems like there's a lot of people that are making money. Like, remember we met that guy in Aspen who talked about some of his doctor friends. Like, it's funny because historically, people always sort of made fun of doctors and dentists as bad investors
They
because,
do.
yeah, right, you've probably heard that too, because they're busy being doctors and dentists. So they're giving their money
Yeah.
to some, portfolio man or someone who's saying, well, why don't you go into this and why don't you go into that? But now I think
Mhm.
that it's more easy to do it yourself.
Right.
Saying how some doctors are sitting there selling, and I don't even know, you can talk about this on
I
another
know.
puts and calls and how when Nvidia dropped, they made tons of money. Like I think there's a lot more people making money in the markets
Hmm.
based on the crazy volatility that's happening right
Yeah. And I think so on the next episode, we'll look at that. So these doctors were buying puts
now.
and they were buying calls. So this is in the options market. And one of the advantages is you don't have to put as much money down. You're just buying an option on the market. So you're not buying like when you and I buy the S&P 500 ETF, it's costing us $300 per share, right? If you're buying options on it, it's a fraction of that. So you're playing with a lot of leverage. Now, if it expires worthless, if the market doesn't trend the way you thought it would, you're out that $5,000, you're out that 10 grand. But if it does work out, there's a lot of leverage, there's a lot of torque. And so that's how these doctors, and I was astonished, and we did get their names and numbers, and excuse me, we will have them on because I think it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting to see what they're doing.
Yeah. And that one, dentist was very interesting, the charity work he was doing. And yeah, so I
Hmm.
think it's good to talk to people that aren't necessarily like in this professionally, but just on how they're managing their money and what they're doing. And I bet you, like if you looked at females versus males, obviously there's a lot more male investors, I think, than females, but I bet you there's a lot more males that are options
Definitely.
than women. I think it's because it is a little bit more of that gambling
Yeah,
aspect.
there's a lot of torque to it.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, I don't know, you would know more the medical term for men who need that kick, that high.
Dopamine rush, that
Dopamine
hit,
rush.
that
Yeah.
high, yeah.
Yeah. But so those are kind of the big pictures right now. There's a lot of bearish points in the market. The tariffs, April 2nd is the reciprocal tariff day that everybody's anticipating and wondering if that will alleviate some of the uncertainty, because we'll have some things that will be known after April the 2nd. And President Trump has said that he'll be more lenient. We'll see. Consumer sentiment fell for the third straight month. And the dip buying. So there's a terminology called, buy the dip, right? The market pulls back, buy it. There's a view right now that dip buying has been exhausted. So if there's no incremental buyers coming into the market because they're exhausted from buying and it going lower, the market tends to drift even lower, if that makes sense. So those are some of the kind of just some of the talking points. U.S. equities having pulled back, TSX pulling back. Our growth GDP in Canada only 0.4%. The other versus the United States at 2.4%. Okay, so we have no growth. We're essentially recession, right? And then the one other thing I would just say that was a new piece of news this week that has investors skittish is the PCE, personal consumption expenditure in the United States, was an inflation reading, came in hotter or higher than expected. So the inflation, the sticky inflation, is a real focus in the United States once again, and it should be in Canada as well. But so that being back in focus, and if we've got higher inflation in the United States, less likely that the U.S. Federal Reserve will lower rates, which alleviates, as we've talked about, when they lower rates, there's more easy money flowing into the system, into the economy. So there's a real concern that they can't lower rates if you've got inflation. And so right now, just FYI, expectations are that U.S. Federal Reserve will cut rates twice in 2025. We'll see. First one is expected in June. But again, that's a real moving target.
Yeah, I don't know. All this makes me want to have a drink, which we can segue into
okay.
alcohol and
let's do it.
Yeah. So, okay. So just a reminder on alcohol. So the low risk drinking alcohol guidelines are for men less than 14 drinks a week and less than 4 or less at one time on one day. For women, it's 7 or less for the week and 3 or less on one day. Now, obviously, when we were in Aspen, we exceeded that. Okay.
Not all the time.
Well, yeah.
First day?
Well, I mean,
can't remember.
You have to think exactly. No, but for the week, right? So you have to think 7 drinks for the week. I mean, a drink is a 5-ounce glass of wine, right? If you're pouring a glass of wine, you're often pouring 8 or 9 glasses. And if all you get is 7 for the week, it seems like for a lot of people that might drink alcohol, and even more so in Europe than North America, it's not that much. It can add up. Now, it's different if you have a vacation week or something like that. But if this is something you're doing week after week after week, you have to look at, is that putting me at risk for liver disease? And the answer is yes, it is. So I thought we could talk about what the liver is, what it does, and then what we can do to mitigate that risk.
Great.
So your liver is on the right side of your abdomen, sort of like underneath your rib cage on the right side. And it's the largest solid internal organ in our body. And it does a lot. And we only have one. And it's very resilient, meaning it's very good at regenerating itself and healing itself. And it can handle a lot of abuse. However, after years of abuse, it can get mad, and that's when you get in trouble. So your liver obviously breaks down alcohol, but it also produces proteins, and it's also involved in metabolism. So when we drink alcohol, that all needs to be processed through the liver. And the liver can only process so much before it starts to get what we call fatty liver disease. So the first stage of liver disease is what we call fatty liver. And so sometimes if you've ever gone for an abdominal ultrasound, the report will say there's a little bit of fatty liver. And some people that don't drink any alcohol can have fatty liver because you can also get fat in your liver from just being overweight or from eating processed foods that are also hard for your liver to break down. So fatty liver is the first stage of liver disease. The next stage is inflammation or hepatitis. So that's when your liver starts to get inflamed, okay? But the good thing is both these stages of liver disease are reversible if you
Hmm.
change your lifestyle. The final stage of liver disease is something you've probably heard of called cirrhosis of the liver. So that's when the liver gets scarred and you get nodules in the liver, and that's often irreversible. And that's when you can get liver failure and start to have a lot of the symptoms and signs of liver disease.
Hmm.
So, this is the other thing about the liver. You don't get a lot of clues or warning signs that it's not happy. Oftentimes, you have no idea that this damage is going on because you don't have any symptoms and you feel perfectly fine. I mean, having symptoms of a hangover is different than having symptoms of liver damage. So the problem is we can go on without having
Hmm.
damage to our liver until one day it says enough. And this is when you start to see signs of liver failure. An example would be when people get the jaundice or the yellowing of the skin. If you get swelling, fluid buildup in your abdomen and lower legs, and like all of a sudden unexplained muscle loss. You get muscle wasting. So those could
Wow.
be later stage signs of liver disease. Okay, so this is all scary and oh my gosh. So but that's
And Melissa, one second here. I think what's so interesting about having this conversation is, yeah, people can look this up on the internet or Grok or Chat GPT and all that. Um, but it's great to hear it from a doctor because like the reality is when you go to your doctor for a checkup, you're kind of in and out. You're getting these ultrasounds. You don't really understand it or comprehend it, and I know there's all these apps that tell you this stuff, but I think it's really different to just listen,
hear it. Yeah,
hear
it
it.
makes a difference. And that's the thing. Like, I read this thing, I think it was like Bill Gates who said that soon, AI is going to take over the jobs of doctors and teachers. And I think it will take over a lot of the part, but you're still going to need that human element to explain, to then
Yeah,
break down and give that, interpretation of what AI or like you just said, what it's saying.
yeah.
So, you know, so what can we do? So this is where it came down to this article of them saying, so what matters is over time, how many units of alcohol you're drinking and over how long. Okay. So the liver damage does not depend on what type of alcohol you drink. So it's not
Oh,
like, oh, I only drink beer or wine. That's better for my liver. Not true. Any unit of alcohol is going to do damage. It's about how much and how long. Okay. So that's the number one thing. So obviously, you want to try to stick to those low risk guidelines, but a good also thing to think about is try to give your liver a break. So don't drink alcohol on consecutive days. Now, if you're on vacation, if it's a trip or something like that, if a guy's on a bachelor party, sure, you might have that happen, but you don't want to make it a habit to have alcohol on consecutive days. Okay, that was one good tip. It's something that
okay.
we can keep in our mind to sort of think about. Next is there's been studies and accumulating evidence that coffee actually helps protect the liver. So I don't know if they're thinking maybe it's the antioxidants in coffee.
Hmm.
So if you like the taste, it's a good idea to have. Now, this doesn't mean that you should have a pot of coffee and then drink all you want, but maybe one or
Right.
two cups of coffee a day uh, isn't so bad.
Well, let me stop you there for one second because, when we were together in Aspen, I said I didn't know if you drank coffee or not.
Hmm.
And you said, yeah, you do. And it's good for your liver. I'm like, what? So
Yeah, see, you were making your
interesting.
lemon.
I was making lemon juice.
Yeah, your lemon smoothie, which is great. Which, by the way, today when I grocery shop, I'm actually going to buy some lemons and do that. But I wanted to remind you when you drink that, which we talked about. So Catherine blends a whole lemon with ice cubes and
Ice.
water and a bit of. Do you put a bit of syrup in it, or do you put any
N-
sweetener in?
You don't need it. You don't even need
Okay.
it, but you can put maple syrup in it. But it's the whole lemon, it's the rind, it's everything, it's the
Everything.
skin, and it's so delicious.
Yeah, and you drink it in the morning, but you want to make sure that you drink it with a straw because it will really erode the enamel on your teeth. All that
Yeah.
acid from the lemon.
Okay.
But anyhow, just an aside.
Yeah. I do have I always try to keep one of those metal straws in my purse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so what else can we do for the liver? So the liver also processes food and junky food. So you want to keep ultra processed foods low. And you and I do a really good job of that. I mean, we all weekend we eat healthy, whole
Yeah.
foods, very few processed and packaged foods. So that makes a huge, so you have to think of all these things are adding insult and injury to your liver. So if you're going to have some alcohol, well, then don't also bombard it with chips and fatty foods and packaged and processed foods. And also you want to keep a healthy weight and exercise. All those things are going to keep good liver health.
Hmm.
Fermented foods. This is an interesting one that I actually don't do, but it's on my list of things to start incorporating. Kimchi and kefir. I'm going to start experimenting with bringing those into my diet because those are fermented foods that have prebiotic and probiotic, um,
Interesting.
yeah, qualities. And there's an association between liver health and gut health. So the more healthy bacteria
Oh,
in our gut is good for our liver as well. Do you have kimchi, kefir? Do you have any of that stuff?
no, so it's kimchi and what is the other one?
Kefir,
Kef-
Kefir. It's so it sort of looks like a yogurt or milk.
I have heard of that, yeah, but I don't
Mm.
do it.
I haven't done it either, and I haven't done much kimchi, but I'm
But
gonna
what's
try.
is kimchi related to kombucha?
No. So
Okay.
kombucha, well, kombucha
I don't.
does have probiotic uh,
Yeah.
when you drink it, so it might, but kimchi's more
Okay.
that like Korean cabbage looking stuff, if you've ever seen
Yeah.
like so anyhow, so I'll get some and I can film
Okay.
how I'm
Yeah.
going to use it. But for now, I get probiotics. I eat yogurt almost every day, Greek yogurt. So
Hmm.
I get a lot of my probiotic from that. And then you can also take a supplement. So there's a lot of good ones on the market. If you go to the pharmacy, you can take a
For
probiotic.
kimchi. For
Not for
kimchi.
kimchi, but for probiotic. Kimchi's a
Oh,
food.
okay.
That you'd
Okay.
have to go to the grocery store to get.
You know what's interesting though, Melissa, going back to we've talked about this and there was more articles in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was last Saturday, looking at all the food dyes. We've talked about
Yeah.
this. And how this was so interesting. I have to find it. You know, when you order sushi or you eat sushi and they've got the ginger and the ginger's like red, you know,
My ginger's usually like yellow.
it should be, but you know, how sometimes you get it and it's reddish or pinkish, pink.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's there's red dye in
Why?
that.
Why would they put that in there? I don't know.
I don't know. So the amazing thing is you think you're doing something good for yourself because you're eating ginger and it's got the red dye. So I wonder with the kimchi, you have to look, I bet, look on the label to make
I'll
sure
get
there's
some today
nothing.
and then we can, yeah,
Yeah.
speak to it. But that's actually just as a interesting aside or factoid with sushi is I read something that wasabi, the reason that you have wasabi with sushi is that because it's such a strong flavor, like it's such a strong spicy taste that it was thought that when you eat raw fish that might have bacteria, the wasabi would help neutralize that bacteria. And it actually made sense to me because I don't know if you use oregano oil. It's one of the few like um
I do it every day.
oh, every day you use oregano. So when if I feel that
Almost.
I'm getting sick, if
Yeah.
I feel that I'm getting sick, I put a few drops of oregano oil and it's like such a strong like, but it's the same theory as with the wasabi. And I really do believe that that help can stave off. In fact, now this is at the early. Now I'm not saying use oregano oil and don't go get a vaccine. Like, there's all these
Right.
people now with the measles outbreak in
Yeah.
um, Texas. There's been so many of these kids that are now being seen for liver damage from eat cod liver oil and all these things, these
What?
wellness and holistic things their parents are trying to give them instead of a vaccine. That's
Wait,
not going to
cod
prevent
liver
measles.
oil can hurt your liver?
Yeah, like overdoing a lot of like we
Anything.
talked about
Yeah.
herbal, like a lot of these like supplements and herbal things, you can OD on those things too, and
Yeah,
that's
I
not
believe
going to
that.
stop you from getting. Yeah, so oregano oil is a nice hack, but don't think that you're gonna not get
Yeah. I would
proper.
say, Melissa, I probably do it 3 to 4 times a week. And if
Well,
I feel like I'm not,
getting
if
sick,
I'm a
you'll do
little
it.
tired, yeah, I do it. And I don't think I've had a cold in 2 years.
Yeah, I felt I was getting a touch of a scratchy throat when I got back from the trip, and I did it, and
Shocking.
yeah, right.
No.
That's fine, you know.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so if you are worried about, your liver, if you are maybe drinking a little bit too much, the best thing to do is just go for a checkup and just start with a blood test. So when you do this blood test, it will look at your liver enzymes. So I often order a panel of three called AST, ALT, and GGT. And by looking at the liver enzymes, it gives me a clue whether the person may be having a bit too much alcohol or maybe a bit too much fatty foods. and if there might be some damage starting, and then I'll order an ultrasound to see if there's any fatty liver. And then if the person wants to pay out of pocket for a screening test, they can get something called a fiber scan. So
Hmm.
that's the best test to see if you're starting to get any liver damage. And it's one of these things that a lot of people don't want to know because it's like, I don't want to know because then I have to deal with it, or, ignorance is bliss. But like I said, like it's actually preventative. Fatty liver disease, alcoholic hepatitis, these are reversible. So if you
Hmm.
do see it, it's actually like, okay, some motivation to like dial it back a little bit. And not just with reducing alcohol, but also with like diet and exercise. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
my liver spiel.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting that, you don't really think about it, but the food also contributes so much to it.
So much. So much. That's why, I'm doing an interview on Monday for a show on Ozempic. And if you're gonna, it's very hard to change the way people eat. Everybody knows that, eating fast food and packaged foods and chips and crisps and all this stuff is not healthy, but it's hard to stop the behavior. And that's why things like Ozempic, at least if you're eating less of it, then you're bombarding your liver with
Yeah.
less of that stuff to process. And similarly with alcohol, that's also helped people drink less. So, uh,
Yeah.
I think it will be interesting to see, in fast forward 10 years, what percent of the population are on GLP-1 drugs. And I think it will be significant.
Well, I kind of hope so, Melissa, because when we were traveling back,
Hmm.
we took different flights, but I was in an airport and it was pretty astonishing. I won't say where, but it was astonishing. Like, most people are easily 30 pounds overweight.
Yeah,
And a lot of people were
probably way
50 to
more.
70, way more. I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. Like it's sad because it's uncomfortable. It would be uncomfortable for them, right? You're not going to feel like
You would
getting
think so,
up.
but I think that becomes the status quo. Like people don't realize how bad they feel until they feel better.
Right.
Like people think that's the baseline. That's a normal way to feel. And then you get people
Yeah.
that lose 50 pounds and they're like, oh my God, like I can breathe
Energy.
better. I'm not snoring anymore. I have more energy. I can work
Yeah.
out, and then healthy habits lead to more healthy habits.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyhow,
Well, I love the saying. I think I've said it too. I just saw the saying the other day, but if you have five friends who smoke, you'll be the sixth.
mhm,
If you have five friends who are fit, you'll be the sixth.
yeah,
So I think that's just an interesting way to think about it sometimes.
totally.
And sometimes if you don't have five friends who are fit, you just have to be the first,
Yeah,
you
you
know?
end up having you end up acting like the people around you. Exactly. So if you
Yeah.
want to reduce the amount you're drinking, you might have to stop hanging out all the time with that group that makes it seem like that's the normal behavior. And if you want
Hmm.
to, same thing with the food and the intake. If you
Right.
reduce the amount, you can't hang out with people that are also,
Yeah.
um,
Okay, so moving on. What was
hmm, now,
again, like I just want to say with the markets, um, I really feel it's a little bit of a wait and see right now. Um,
I think a lot of people feel that it's like, no one really knows what's going on. It's sort of just, yeah, wait and see. I've actually been a little less excited about it too because it just seems it's so much information. It's over every day is information
yeah.
overload, you know?
And yeah, and another saying in the markets is, you don't want to catch a falling knife. Like I don't want to necessarily put some money to work here and the market continues to go down. Now, having said that, at some point, and maybe it's Monday, I don't know, but if there's certain stocks that I like and you want a position that's, X number of dollars, do a fifth, buy a fifth of the position, and
Hmm.
then wait a couple of weeks, buy another fifth. Then the three
Yeah.
fifths. That's another like to leg. It's called legging into a stock, so you can do that too.
Is there anything that you're looking at? Anything you're close to?
Uh, No, I mean there are. Like I'd like to own Goldman Sachs stock, but it was interesting. Jeffries came out and said that Jeffries is one of the capital markets, or one of the brokerage companies on Wall Street, and they said that capital markets is more challenging right now because of the uncertainty. So what does that mean? Capital markets means equity issuances, so IPOs. It means just issuing new stock. So that's a little bit more challenging because think about it, if you're the company's CEO, you don't necessarily want to issue stock at a a price where we're lower today and 3 weeks from now we could be higher, then you get some more money for a stock. So it's all of this is kind of having people at bay a little bit. At the same time too, there has been merger and acquisition activity that is on an uptick. So I'm kind of trying to read what Jeffries is saying and make sense of it. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have certainty, or at least a little bit, there's never certainty, but if you don't have a little bit more certainty than what we have now, it is harder for company management to say, let's go do this deal, let's issue stock, let's go buy another company. Kind of gets put on hold. So my point is Goldman Sachs is, like the leader in capital markets, in my opinion, and most people's opinion. And so is this the right price to buy the stock, or do I wait?
Right. And so like for me, like who I own mostly just index funds, and I only stock pick, for a little bit of fun, and so it's a very small percentage of my portfolio, these individual stock picks. So usually I do it for things that interest me. And so that's
Right.
why we've been talking about Revolve. And we were in Aspen.
Yeah.
Remember, we were shopping and I'm like, oh my God, it was the first bricks and mortar Revolve and Forward, which they also own. It's a little bit of the higher end version of Revolve store. And so I was like, we
Mm-hmm.
have to go in. So we went
Mm-hmm.
in. I bought a skirt, which I've already worn. You bought two skirts?
Yep.
Yeah.
Already
And
worn.
it's it's interesting to see. I think they said they have another one planned, another store that's going to be coming up. I forget where they told me um
I know, I can't
they told
remember.
me it was going to be. But anyhow, so that it's interesting because I went out for dinner on Thursday night with some girlfriends who are fashionable. And if I looked at our outfits, almost all of them were online orders. And I would say I could look at several items and that were from Forward or Revolve that we were wearing that night.
Yeah. Well, and so quite frankly, for next time, I will look at that stock again because remember we looked at it and the fundamentals looked good, in my opinion. To me and for me, the stock was on the expensive side. With
Yeah.
the market coming down, it's worth it to see if, in your opinion or analyst's opinion, that it's worth the current price. And interestingly, one of your beliefs, I believe, was that, online shopping here to stay, great way to see, these products, and, it's efficient to your point, and there's so much selection. That's the other thing. You go into stores, not as much selection because they don't want to necessarily carry all the inventory. But on this online, there's more to choose from. And the quality seems actually pretty good. The other thing I would just add with that bricks and mortar store, to me, what was so interesting as well, it was curated well. It was
Yeah.
well lit. It's a good experience. Most importantly, traffic, constant traffic.
Yeah.
Do you remember? There were a lot, people were
Yeah, it was
coming and
busy.
going. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
that,
Yeah.
so,
I mean, it's a tourist town and it's a wealthy town, so I'm not surprised, that
yeah.
people going in and out. It was well positioned for that reason. And also maybe like brand awareness, and also like if they see people Aspen's very aspirational, right? There's
Right.
a lot of influence there that go there. People, wow, it looks so nice. And so if they see people shopping at that store or buying stuff there, it makes people it's good for their marketing and advertising, I would think, because makes
Hmm.
people think, oh, I can buy that too online, what this person,
Hmm.
just bought. So
Yeah.
anyhow,
Okay.
so now we're back. Ski season's over. It's finally spring. And if you're an allergy sufferer, you're probably going to start feeling really uncomfortable in the next few weeks. Do you get allergies?
No.
No, you don't? Okay, so I a little bit, not too bad, but my daughter gets horrible spring allergies, which always makes me nervous because she's a singer. She sings a lot. And so always around this time of year, it's like touch and go how her voice is gonna, because she's
Oh, no.
yeah. So people are like, well, what cause? I mean, most people know spring allergies is caused by pollen, right? So pollen's the main cause in the spring, and that's from trees and grass. But the problem with the pollen is it can travel in the air far. So it's not even necessarily what's near you, but if it's a windy day, that's why allergies tend to be so much worse on these windy days. So if it's a windy morning and you suffer from allergies, you might want to stay indoors that
Oh,
morning,
my.
shut your windows and your doors because the pollen's going to blow in. So that's one thing that you can do. Um, Vacuuming a lot. When you come in from outside, wash your hands and wash your face. And if you can
Hmm.
wash your hair more often in the spring, it's helpful too because the pollen stays on us
Wow.
and you'll constantly have these allergies. So that's a good thing that people forget to do.
Hmm.
Vacuum extra during this time.
Hmm.
And you can look at getting like an air purifier
Mm-hmm.
if that helps. But so those are like things that you can do. But if you're still suffering, then you would go to some medications. So allergies are caused by histamine. So basically, our immune system for people that are allergic, that get spring allergies, their immune system goes haywire when they're introduced to these allergens.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden they create these antibodies and then they release tons of histamine into the system. And histamine is responsible for these symptoms like itchy, watery eyes and sneezing and coughing and runny nose and congestion. And when people have these allergies, they're so uncomfortable to deal with.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if they're mild, you can just use an over-the-counter antihistamine. I'm sure you've seen a lot. There's drowsy and non-drowsy, so you can look
Mm-hmm.
at those options. But if that's not hacking it, talk to your doctor because there's also prescription medication. So we have
Mm-hmm.
prescription antihistamines. Some names you might be familiar with are Blexten or Rupall. There's prescription nasal corticosteroids like, Nasonex or um, Flonase you might have heard of. And there's also
Hmm.
eye drops that can really help if your eyes are constantly itchy and tearing. And
Wow.
if that's still not cutting it, then get a referral to an allergist because you can look at doing immunotherapy where you're given small doses of the allergen so you build up a tolerance. And if it's really
Wow.
bad, there's biologic drugs, monoclonal antibodies that bind to IgE in your system and control, and that really helps people. So an example of that name is Xolair is one you might have
Oh
heard of.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
long story short, don't suffer in silence. And a lot of people do,
They
you know,
do, don't they?
a lot of people do. And they don't realize there's things that can help. And,
Mm-hmm.
these things, allergies aren't going to kill you, but it can definitely make you uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
we're focused on health and wellness and, feeling
Yeah.
as best as we
Feeling
can
good. Feeling
and
good.
feeling
So you can
good.
kind of
Yeah.
keep doing what you want to do.
Yeah. So I don't think we have that much more time left. I was going to talk
Okay.
about marijuana, speaking about feeling good, although to me,
Let's
I'm not
save that.
yeah, to me, I don't partake. But
I don't either.
yeah, it doesn't do it for me. But we can talk, a lot of people do. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll talk about next segment, some new
Yeah.
studies that are coming out on marijuana. And just to end off on, there was a study that I actually thought was a little bit stupid, but some of the studies you read are like, was that a project? Did someone in school need to do a project and come up with that?
Right.
This study was on pecans.
Oh
And
yeah.
they looked at 138 people and they gave half of them, they said, replace your normal daytime snack with 57 grams of pecans, which is about 30 pecans. And the other half, they said, just go on and eat normally like you normally would. And then they wanted to wait. And these are people that were at risk for metabolic syndrome, which is almost everybody. So people at risk for high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, or overweight. And they said, okay, after the time period, they took their blood and they found that the people that swapped out their regular snacks for pecans had better cholesterol. So it lowered their bad cholesterol, their LDL. However, they gained 2 pounds.
What?
Yes, which goes to show you, I mean, 30 nuts is a lot of
It's a
nuts.
lot of nuts.
Very healthy, okay? So they're high in good fats and they're good for us. So people need to include more nuts in their diet. Almonds, walnuts, pistachios, pecans. However, you have to be mindful of the quantity because
Yeah.
they're very calorically dense. They're fat, right? So
Yeah.
you can't just sit there in the peanut jar thinking, oh, it's nuts, it's healthy, and just handful after handful because too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Absolutely. Why don't we leave it on that note? And
Okay.
that's always the way, right? Too much of a good thing is a bad thing. My father
Yeah,
was
it's everything
it's
about
every about my father was
moder-
brilliant in
yeah,
moderation.
it, it's true, right? It's the simplest advice and it's the hardest to take sometimes.
It is. He also, though, was, in World War II, trained to be in World War II, didn't go overseas as a bomber pilot. And
Wow.
if you really think about that, because he, grew up in the Depression in
Yeah.
Canada, there things weren't plentiful.
Yeah.
This whole society's become more.
Well, that's also why, again, going to the GLP-1s, we are living in a society where all of a sudden we have to exercise that willpower because things are just so plentiful
Yeah.
and it's hard to do. So anyhow,
Yeah.
right, have a
Well,
good one. I
with
have to
the
do my daughter's
yeah.
makeup. She's got a dance
Okay.
competition.
I'm so excited. Send pictures.
I will.
Okay, talk to you
Okay,
later. Okay,
bye.
bye.